Hey guys, how you doing? Lecture 5.3, technically the fourth lecture, just to confuse you. Remember the 1.5. Alrighty. This one is entitled What? Where? No, it's actually sort of entitled What? Where? Anyway, the point I'm going to get at here, or just speak to briefly, is this distinction you will have gotten to now about the fact that sometimes in the brain, there seems to be different parts of the brain that focus on understanding what it is we're seeing versus where that thing is. And so we sometimes call these the what and where pathways. For example, in the visual system, it's referred to as the what and where pathways. So I want to give you, but also the auditory system seems to work in a similar way. So what I want to do is talk to you about that a little bit, have you think about this a little bit more, but to do so in the context of a little bit more neuropsychology, so that you also think about neuropsychology and the contribution it makes, and get that sense of how it's different from neuroscience per se. You know, a lot of the biology chapter was really the brain chapter, chapter 3, was really neuroscience. Really understanding the brain and how it's connected. But we sometimes get to some of that neuroscientific knowledge through neuropsychology. So again, let's just begin here. Nice little apples. The simple point I want to make here is, if I ask you, for example, to hand me the green apple, if this were a real scene, first of all, you have to figure out which one is the green apple. But then once you do, if you want to hand it to me, you have to know where in the space that green apple is and reach for that, in that direction. So, often that's what the where is about. The where is about moving towards something or grabbing something, or, literally wanting to know where that thing is in relation to us, so that we, can either go and get it, or stay away from it if that's what we want to do. So the interesting thing again is that when the visual system comes in, and it comes all the way to the brain, but once it hits the occipital lobe, it starts to diverge, and it seems like it goes two different directions, where one direction is all about figuring out what is out in the world, and the other is about where things are. Okay, so I want to tell you just about an experiment and give you a sense of how some of this goes. So this is work done at University of Western Ontario by a professor there named Melvin Goodale. And it was on a patient of his called DF. So often these patients, these neuropsychology patients, we just refer to them by their initials. And this patient had undergone damage to the occipital lobe, and to a number of other areas. So again, normally what we would imagine is that information would come in to the occipital lobe, but then it would kind of diverge. Once it kind of gets to this association cortex, it seems like it kicks off two sorts of processing streams. One called the dorsal stream. Dorsal, with brains, we have all these words for up, down, back, forward. But think of dorsal and think of like a dolphin has a dorsal fin, right? And where is that dorsal fin? It's at the top of its body, on its back. And so this is the dorsal stream, and this is the ventral stream. It seems like this is the sort of what, and this is the where, at least as we sort of look at this. So this patient had damage to various parts of the brain, and it seemed to really mess with her what processing. So let me just give you a sense of an experiment that they did to do this. So you see here a hand, and you see a slot like that. And so what the person would see is this slot first. And they would be asked, using their hand, to just move that tile until it was the same as the slot. So do they know what they're seeing? That slot is at a particular angle. Do they know what they're seeing? And of course, they could move that slot in different directions. And so what you see here is when the slot was sort of up and down, and we make everything relative to the sort of up and down. If I asked a control person, somebody without damage to this pathway, to kind of put it in the same orientation, they pretty much get it bang on. So just so you know, this is an average. Sometimes it might have been this way, and they put it that way. So we've changed everything relative to this one orientation. So you can see a bunch of trials relative to that one orientation. And what you see is that the control people are basically nailing it, right? They're putting it almost exactly like that thing is. No matter where it is, they can almost perfectly match it. This patient, however, is not. When it's this way, their projections are all over the board. It's like they're looking, but they can't tell what they're looking at. Completely lost. Now, here's the interesting thing though. If you ask them to what he calls post it, to actually put this thing into the slot, then what you see is the things clean up really nicely. So first of all, control subjects have no trouble doing this. They go right to that orientation, but so too does D. Once she starts moving her hand, she is able to orient that in almost exactly, I mean, she's making a little bit of mistakes, right? She's not as good as a control. There's still a little bit of kludginess, but relative to her, matching performance, her posting performance is much, much, much better. And the notion here is that's because that includes the where information. And once you start moving, it's the where system that kind of takes control of the hand to get it in the right orientation. And that where system knows the orientation. It has information about where, how you should put this, but the what system doesn't yet. Please excuse me while I pause for a moment here. Okay, getting better at these pausing things. Yeah, so you have the central idea here, right? It's like one part of the brain doesn't have information that the other part does. And this is sort of a theme I want to kind of work up for you is that the brain every now and then takes the information that's being processed and then passes it off to different systems, which means that sometimes, one system, if there's damage, one system might lose the information, but it's still around in another. I want to give you another example of that related to things you've been learning. So this is the what and the where visual pathway. Let's stick with vision, but let me tell you about a phenomenon called blind sight. And I've already introduced you to this a little bit, but I want to give you the rest of the story now, so to speak. So the idea here would be if this was somebody's primary visual cortex, and there was damage for some reason to that primary visual cortex. I told you this before, that damage in that primary cortex would lead to a sort of black spot in the visual field. So as this person's looking, they would always see this black spot there where there was no information coming in. And they will tell you that there's nothing there. And so what you could actually do, for example, if this were you, I could take this pen, and I might be further away from you a little bit, just so it wasn't too big, but I could move it around and I could say, tell me when it disappears, when it's no longer in your blind, and when you can't see it, when it falls into your blind spot, basically. And so maybe I find that right here, I'm worried now. I'm never worried you guys can actually see my pen after my bowl demo. I'm a little worried. So I'm going to stay up here. But let's say this was in your blind spot and you said, I don't see it. It's gone. And I'd say, okay, cool. Do me a favor. I'm going to move it and maybe I'll make it horizontal. Maybe I'll make it vertical. I'm not going to tell you, but I'm going to put it somewhere. And okay, so right now, is it horizontal or vertical? And you would say, I told you I can't see it, man. I don't know. And I said, I know you can't see it. I know. Just guess. And you'd say, okay, whatever, stupid, but horizontal. And I'd say, okay, cool. I'm going to move it again. What about now? Horizontal. Okay, I'm going to move it again. What about now? Vertical. Okay, and move it again. What about now? Horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical, vertical, horizontal. So what I'm pointing out is, even though you cannot see it, and you say you cannot see it, if I ask you to guess, you tend to guess correctly. Not as correctly as I just showed you. So it's not like you'll get 100% right. You may only get 70 or 80% right, but you're getting 70 or 80% right. And if your brain really couldn't see it, then you should, here's the pen, by the way, sorry, I meant to put that in, then you really shouldn't get any of those right. So the fact that you can get them right, well, I shouldn't say you shouldn't get any of them right, you should be right 50% of the time, if it's vertical or horizontal, right? So if you're 70 or 80, that suggests the information is getting in somewhere information from that, even though it's not hitting your occipital lobe, somewhere along this pathway, that information is still there. It's this that's causing the scotoma. So somewhere that information diverges and gets to other parts of the brain. So even on this pathway to the primary visual cortex, it seems as though information is getting to other parts of the brain. So all this to show you that it's a very complex process, this stuff coming in. And the other thing I like to bring up with this, because we're going to tie it up again near the end of this chapter, is the issue of subliminal perception. What this suggests, and blindsight was one of the first phenomenon that they used to talk about this. It suggests that sometimes the brain includes information that we are not consciously aware of. So the scotoma really is what you're consciously seeing, and you don't consciously see that pen when I do it. But the fact that you can guess the orientation suggests that some part of your brain is aware of the orientation of the pen. It's just not a part of the brain that you are conscious of. Perception without awareness, or often called subliminal perception. We're going to come back to this issue, but again, this is another neuropsychology demonstration because it comes from brain damage patients, right? This is another demonstration that the brain kind of splits information up. It doesn't all always just follow one path. It can get split to different parts of the system, sometimes to do different tasks, like figure out what it is versus where it is. But when it splits like that, it means that this information now lives in various parts of the brain. And so if it's damaged in one, that doesn't mean it's damaged in another. It may live on somewhere else. Again, just showing you how complex this little hunk of mass in our head is. Okay, so I'm going to leave this one as a short one there. I will come back about subliminal perception and other things a little later on. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.